Let's talk today about a New York Times article published May 25th and authored by Ross Douthat. Its title is Liberated and Unhappy. Apparently, today's liberated Western women are unhappier than they've ever been. Douthat and the New York Times seem to think that this is important enough to be included with all the news that's fit to print. So let's take a look at it. Douthat takes most of his cue from a study called The Paradox of Declining Female Happiness, a paper by economists Betsy Stevenson and Justin Wolfers for the National Bureau of Economic Research, which is the largest and probably most respected economic research organization in the United States. You can buy the paper online at their website if you feel like wasting your time, but they probably have papers that are a lot more interesting. I'm not going to spend any time on the NBER's paper here, and I'm certainly not going to waste energy on Douthat's introduction, which is blah 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 women this and women that. So let's just get down to business. Since it's my goal to rake Douthat over the coals a little, I'll start with some direct quotes. Here's the first one. The decline of the two-parent family, for instance, is almost certainly depressing life satisfaction for the women stuck raising kids alone. Did you say stuck? Guess you want to ignore the fact that women file upwards of 70% of divorces and that most of these are on a no-fault basis. I wouldn't call this stuck. I'd call it choice, which is what feminists always wanted. In fact, it was feminists who fought hard state by state along with blood-sucking lawyers to institute no-fault divorce. So as Judge Judy says, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. And then there's all the women who give birth to kids out of wedlock. Maybe we should do a study to show how many of these women have loaded guns pointed to their heads every time they have unprotected sex. Again, these women are making their own choices and no one is forcing them to do anything, despite what liberal victim ideologues like the New York Times staff want us to believe. On to more. I quote, "Again, maybe the happiness numbers are being tipped downward by a mounting female workload, the famous second shift in which women continue to do the lion's share of household chores even as they're handed more and more workplace responsibility. It's certainly possible, but as Wolfers and Stevenson point out, recent surveys actually show similar workload patterns for men and women all over." Now, here we have the popular myth that all mothers actually have two full-time jobs, the one they go to in the outside world and the one at home. While the author offers that this is certainly possible, and no doubt he thinks it's true, the researchers state that recent surveys show similar workloads for men and women overall. What I love about this is that the researchers themselves have to admit that the double workload myth is just that, a myth. But anyone could see that easily enough if they spent enough time in my neighborhood, where there is certainly no wealth of Betty Crockers with full-time careers. You're lucky you can find a career woman in my neighborhood who won't burn water. And I haven't seen any women in Jimmy Choo's beating clothes against a rock down at the Hudson River recently. On to more. Or perhaps the problem is political. Maybe women prefer egalitarian, low-risk societies, and the cowboy capitalism of the Reagan era had an anxiety-inducing effect on the American female. But even in the warm, nurturing, egalitarian European Union, female happiness has fallen relative to men's across the last 3 decades. So then, perhaps women have been thrown for a loop by entering the capitalist fray. Well, that can happen. Maybe they just need more time to get used to it. But I don't think that's all of it. I've talked about this before, and I believe, and this is just me, that women have discovered that the workplace is not always the Elysian field of self-actualization that Betty Friedan promised it would be. It's just work. And when it turned into an obligation and a chore, which is what a lot of work is, women got bummed out about it. Norman Mailer warned women about this years ago when he told women that heading out at the crack of dawn to some job every day was not all it was cracked up to be. And he was of course vilified for not towing the liberation theology of his day. True, Mailer was a loose cannon himself, but he did write one of the greatest war novels of all time in his early 20s, so he had some insight into human nature. Feminists like Friedan, with her Smith College pedigree, saw work more as an idea than as a reality. Friedan herself had the freedom to work outside the home or not, like most upscale women of her day. Friedan and her European counterpart Simone de Beauvoir, Sartre's lesser half, felt that women who stayed at home were wasting their lives and belonged in the career world. But what did they mean by the career world? Did they mean the world where we work sometimes thankless jobs for little pay and backbreaking physical and mental stress? I don't think so. What they meant was some illusory universe of self-actualization. To those of us who've actually had no choice but to slog away in the work world, this idea is of course a joke. In fact, Friedan's and Beauvoir's idea is probably the first ingredient of contemporary female unhappiness, and if women want to explore this, they can still buy the books on Amazon.com. That is, if they can get enough time off work to read the books. So the question remains, what, oh what, can we possibly do to make women happier today? I have two answers to this. One, the short answer, who cares? Two, the longer answer. Grown-ups are responsible for their own happiness, and children's happiness depends on others. If you're a man and you and your family seem to have a pretty decent life, and your wife or woman is dreadfully unhappy nonetheless, it's her problem because she's a child. The solution is to let her know this in no uncertain terms and then go about your business. There is no other way to deal with a spoiled brat than to let them know that despite their whining, the world turns. You're either on the bus or you're not, so stop holding everyone else up. You don't need relationship counseling or therapy. You don't need a long discussion where nothing is solved. You don't need to put your heads together and come up with a compromise. There is nothing to compromise about. One of you has an inability to deal with the reality you've chosen, and what you need is a good swift kick in the brain. Maybe she'll cry when you say what you have to say. That's fine. A good cry can be cathartic. Even the therapists say so. The bottom line is this. Feminists asked for it, they got it, and now they don't like it. Well, isn't that just too bad, ladies? Don't we all wish life was a restaurant where we could send the dish back if it was undercooked? Allow me to guide you to the buffet area where you can choose your life scenario to your liking. I'm sorry, we're out of salmon right now, ma'am, but try the ham, it's just as good. If you're a man and you even start to care why women as a group are supposedly unhappier today than they were before in Western culture, you've already lost. You are wasting your time. Go out and find a happy woman and talk to her instead. You'll learn a lot more. They might be few, but there are women who have reconciled themselves to the reality that they're not going to get everything the Nike commercial of second and third wave feminism promised them. They know that sometimes life is good, sometimes it sucks, and most of the time we live and get over it, or not. That is existence, and if you can't deal with it, you have some growing up to do. Radical feminism posited an ultimate falsehood to women. You are all victims. When your victimhood is removed, you will all be eternally happy. And let's add a rider to that contract. If you're not happy, it's someone else's fault. But like a lawyer friend once told me, some things are not worth the paper they're not written on. What this ideology did do was create a nation of whiners with absolutely no ability for introspection. They've spent so much of their lives playing the victim and pointing fingers at others, the introspective muscle withered and died. That's why all hardcore victim ideologues seem so one-dimensional, because everything is external to them. It's this externality born from liberal structuralism that leads to one-sidedness, double standards, shallow identity politics, and a belief in theory before reality. And in a strange, perverted way, this chronic externality actually results in a kind of group narcissism, where the group mind forgets that there are actually other people in this world. I know why the caged bird sings. She sings because she switched cages voluntarily and she doesn't like the new one. Well, that's tough luck. We all build our own prisons in a sense, and it's futile to rattle your cup against the bars when it's you that holds the keys. You can free yourself any time you want. Or you can take a different perspective on things once in a while and at least spend some time in the yard. Anyway, that's all I have right now. I'll leave the fancy footwork to others and stick to calling it like I see it. In the meantime, I'll keep my eyes out for something else we can make fun of. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.